of making up an exit plan. When you go on a plane, usually the first thing an airline steward does as the plane is getting ready to take off is they point out to you where all the exits are. And if there's a young person, age-wise, or a small person sitting in the aisle where the exits are, they will usually go over and ask them, are you capable and strong enough to lift out the exit window if it has to be opened? And if they're not, they will be asked to move, and someone with a little bit more strength might be put in that seat to help open that window if there is an emergency. I remember as a teenager, this is before cell phones, we had to use these things called a telephone, a pay phone. And my father's question was always, do you have a dime? Now I am aging myself because it did eventually turn into, do you have a quarter? But I always had to carry around either a dime or a quarter, just in case something happened. I could call home and say, hey, I need help. Car's broken down, I'm in a place where I shouldn't be. I just need to be rescued here. So that was my escape plan, was having that dime or that quarter. Some of you with children might have developed an escape plan in your own home. If there's a fire, we'll meet at such and such place outside the house.
Amen.
So if they had to climb out a window or go through a back door or you went through the front door, there is a place for you and your children together so that you can count noses and make sure everybody was out of the house. One summer when I was a teacher, I worked for the American Red Cross. And there was about 6 of us from around the county. We came together and we were writing curriculum for the American Red Cross having to do with hurricane awareness and how to be prepared in case a hurricane came and how to develop an escape plan or an exit plan. So if a hurricane came, where were you and your family going to meet afterwards? How would you contact each other? Again, this is about the time where cell phones are kind of big and clunky. You can still have a cell phone. They're certainly not the little things that we walk around with now. They were kind of those big, gigantic things. But we still were coming up with a plan in case something happened. We as Christians have an escape plan. Our escape plan comes through the deliverance of God. Our scripture tells us today that God has plans for our escape. It says God will provide a way out. Now, notice it doesn't tell us how. It just says God will provide a way out. Because your escape plan might not be the same as my exit plan. Because you might be in a different situation. So God's not going to list in the scripture every single potential exit plan. Plus the exit plans that you would have had 2,000 years ago aren't going to look anything like the escape plans we now have for the buildings and so forth and the situations and the life that we live now compared to 2,000 years ago. Your escape plan might be getting away from that lion that's coming after your sheep. That's not the escape plan we're going to have nowadays. At least not us in this room. There's not too many of us who are going to go home in their backyard and find a coyote. I don't think. And everyone needs an exit plan. Everyone needs deliverance. Because what we need deliverance from, first and foremost, is our sin. We all sin. If you don't sin, please see me later. I want to know how you're doing it. You can be the most moral person alive. You can be the most ethical person in the entire world, and probably sometime in your life, you have still sinned. Angry at that driver that cut you off. Darlene and I thought this morning we were going to be plastered on the wall for this guy that decided to pull out in front of us. We were very kind though. We called him a jerk. And then all of us, probably have those frequent hand gestures that we use to show our disapproval of other drivers. Admit it. And then there are those times where we walk past opportunities. We see something that we should do, and we think, oh, someone else is going to help that poor person. Someone else will donate to that person who's looking for some food, and we walk past them. And all these things that they're minor. They might not seem very important, except for that person that's hungry. But they're sins, and we need to be delivered from them. So all of us need deliverance in some way or another. And again, God will see us through this, but not necessarily tell us how it's going to be done in the scripture, but God is still going to let us know how to get it done. But before we actually look and claim this promise of an exit or escape further, I want to make 3 clarifications about temptations. The temptation itself is not good or bad. The temptation could be an opportunity for you to strengthen your faith. The temptation itself is not the sin. The sin is how you respond to that temptation. Are you able to resist it or in a positive manner and grow in your spiritual self, or do you fall victim to that temptation and allow that temptation to take control of your life, causing you to sin? And acknowledge that some temptations are just too much for us to handle on our own. They're too heavy. They're too big. And this is where we really need to apply this promise that we have here in 1 Corinthians, that God will not let us be tested by more than we're able to handle, and that God will provide us with a way out. Ever watch gymnastics? Those girls and guys that just seem to be able to spin and float and jump in the air and come back down in some kind of twirl, or they're on some kind of rings and they're just flopping around and going around in circles, and you think at any minute they're going to fly off and end up on the other side of the gym. And I remember when we had to do gymnastics in elementary school, we always had what was called a spotter. And that spotter was to watch you. And if it was your turn to jump off over the horse, they would be there just in case you couldn't make it over it and you slammed into it and they were to catch you from falling on your face. They were kind of your protection. They were part of your exit plan. I think of God as being our spotter. God's right there watching everything we do, everywhere we go. God knows exactly when we're going to step into some trouble. And God is there as our spotter. Now, when we talk about deliverance, we're once again talking about God's character. Like last week when we talked about courage. It wasn't necessarily our courage, but the courage that God gives us because of the courage that God has God's self. That is part of who God is. Well, in this case, the deliverance is because of God's character of the one who delivers. One scholar says if you are alive, you've probably been tempted sometime in your life. And we need to remember that it's God's faithfulness, not our faithfulness, that gets us out of trouble. But God will never leave us. This is a promise we've talked about before, that God is always with us, that God is present with us. That means God's with us even in the times where we come up to our temptations and we are at our trials. God is right there. God's presence is always a part of God's character. Now, our deliverance does not remove the temptation. Hear me again. Deliverance doesn't make the temptation just disappear. And yes, God could just snatch that incident away. It could be done that way. That God is going to work with us in facing that temptation and helping us to make choices to overcome the temptation. You know, if you think about a baby, and if you sit a baby on the floor, okay, and every time the baby wants something, you bring that something to the baby, that baby is never going to try to get up off that floor. That baby is never going to try to walk. Because why does it need to walk? You brought it everything it needs. The first whimper, you're, oh, what does the baby need? I got to run and give it to him. There are times where you need to let that baby kind of explore and figure it out and climb on a chair and try to exercise those legs so it eventually gets to the point where that baby can walk. God's there too. God could just take everything away from us. God could take anything that's bad in our lives away. And sometimes God does. But will that help our faith to grow? If God just goes poof? See, we're a lot stronger than we realize. We are a lot stronger than we realize. I am stronger than I realize. You need to be saying that to yourself too. Let's say it. I am stronger than I realize. I am stronger than I realize. And God will help you to use that strength in meeting your temptations, in helping to provide you with deliverance. Will help you to continue strengthening your spiritual muscles when those temptations come before us. You know, I remember when I was installed here in the church. I came in February, and that summer we had an installation, and one of our elders came. And as I stood up here with the elder, she kept asking me a bunch of questions. Will I do this, and will I do that, and will I do this for the church, and will I do this for God, and will I do this for all of you, the congregation? And each one of my answers was, with God's help, I would. Because I knew I couldn't do it on my own. But I knew that with God's help, I could overcome anything that came this way for this church. That I could do anything this church needed when I allowed God to help me with it. So it's with God's help that we're able to overcome all the temptations in our lives, because God will provide the way out.
Yes.
1 Corinthians 10:13. God will provide the way out.
Mm-hmm.
Deliverance provides the escape. God gives us strength for the escape. And when it just seems so overwhelming that it's beyond us, God will then reveal to us how we can get around it, through it, behind it, over it, whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
We are much stronger than we think.
Mm-hmm.
God providing us an escape is our emergency exit plan. God's exit requires us to be attentive to what God is doing in our lives. Are you paying attention to when God is trying to show you how to get out of something that you're in that you don't want to be into? You know, there's that old joke, it's a very old joke. Guy's on the roof, there's a big storm and a flood, and as the water rises, he keeps climbing higher and higher on the roof. And he's praying to God, God, save me! And then here comes a guy in a canoe. Hey, buddy, come on, get in the canoe, I'll take you. Oh, no, it's okay, God's going to save me. A little while later, a guy in a rowboat comes along. Hey, buddy, come on off the roof, get in the rowboat, we'll take you out of here. No, God's going to save me. Finally, a motorboat. The water's gotten that high that a motorboat can now go through the water. Hey, buddy, get in the motorboat. We'll take you out of here. Oh, no, God's going to save me. And the man drowns. He goes to heaven, and he's standing before God, and he looks at God and says to him, why didn't you save me? And God looks at him, what do you you want. I sent you a canoe, I sent you a rowboat, I sent you a motorboat. You didn't get in. I provided the way for you. I provided the escape plan. You didn't take it. Are you paying attention to when God is trying to get you to get out of those situations? Because you can expect to be delivered. God will provide the way out. Just look for it. Because God's already provided it. Now, we have some bad examples in Scripture of people who didn't take the out. David, king of Israel, he has this temptation. This beautiful Bathsheba. She is out on her roof taking a bath. Now, she was doing what people normally do when they take a bath. She was naked. I know, scandals in Scripture, a naked woman. And David could have overcome the temptation if he had turned away and gone back into the palace. Instead, he stays out there and watches her. And he watches her to the point that he's gone from admiring her beauty to lust. And the lust then causes him to figure out a way to get rid of her husband, causes her husband to be killed in battle so that he can claim her as his own. He did not take the way out. God provided him a way out. Walk away, David. Go find something else to do. Walk away. But he chose not to. And then we have the good example, Joseph. Joseph did not have an easy life. At the point in the story in which I'm talking about for Joseph here, he is a prisoner and a servant. He is working for a man that Joseph is being loyal to. He is helping him in his industry. And this man, Potiphar's wife, takes a liking to Joseph. You understand what I'm trying to say? She just thinks he's all that and some more. And she wants him. And he's finding his way out because he knows his exit plan is to just leave the room. He does it so quickly that he leaves his cloak behind, which kind of incriminates him later. But he chose the exit plan of leaving. Joseph wanted to honor the owner and the trust that the owner had put in him. Joseph took the way out that God gave him. Joseph honored the laws of God. And while that temptation seemed beautiful, and having someone offer themselves to you sexually, falling into that sin, that temptation would have been sinful. These things apply even into our world today. If you are married, if you are in a committed relationship, be loyal to that relationship, no matter what. No matter who throws themselves at your feet or at any other part of your body, take the out and walk away. Joseph's actions and his voice affirms his relationship with God. So when temptation comes before you, are you going to be David, who doesn't take God's way out? Or are you going to be Joseph, who takes the way out? Because there is an escape route in place. Put the power of the promise of this scripture into action. God will not let you be tested beyond your strength. So when you think your strength is going to give out, you pray for God to give you the strength. And when it comes to a point that you can't endure it anymore, know that God will show you the way out. A reminder that it's not just happening just to you. Temptation happens to everyone. Look at the person to your left. Look at the person on your right. You have just looked at two other people in the room who are also going through some of the same stuff you have. Temptations. Now, their temptations might be a little different than yours because they're living their own life. They're not living yours. But it happens to everyone. and remember. Claim the promise of deliverance. This is like a 2-sentence verse. Memorize it. And if need be, just memorize the parts that say, God will not let you be tested over what you have the strength for, and God will provide the way. God will provide the way. Keep that part of the scripture in your head. God will provide the way. Mm-hmm. And if you keep finding yourself in the same temptation, maybe it's time to get some prayer warriors on your side. Now, you don't have to tell them the whole story. Just say, pray for me for strength. That's all. You don't got to give them all the sort of details. It's not their business. Because you know how gossip works. Just ask them, pray. Just pray for strength that I will overcome. And be prepared to rejoice. Because God will show you how to escape. Amen. Let us rise as we're able and join together in our hymn of response.